Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And I'll do this. David Lynch's 2006 film, Inland Empire, is, as of this writing, the last theatrically released feature film from David Lynch, one of the single greatest artists in the history of the medium.
Are you ready to work Friday night with a monkey?
Most people regard the film as completely indecipherable. However, I follow the lead of Matt Murray of Cornpone Flicks from his essay on the film.
It was shot in an unconventional manner, with Lynch using a standard definition Sony Handycam and working without a completed script. However, I reject wholeheartedly the idea that it's a plotless collection of scenes leading nowhere, as some have suggested.
Murray is right. Lynch does not make incoherent films, and Lynch himself asserts this. Lynch said of his first film, Eraserhead, that it was a real definite thing in my head. It's not like thrown together abstract, it's meant to be that way abstract. He said of Lost Highway that it is a straight ahead story. There are only a few things that are a hair off. The question is, what is the best strategy for understanding Inland Empire? You could arrange all the events in a timeline and it won't help, even though I did that. You can make a map of all the locations and that won't help, even though I did that as well. Although I can finally beat Legend of Zelda. You have to think about thematic consistency to really understand the film. And what is the theme? It's in the subtitle. A woman in trouble. Very unambiguous. But what causes the trouble?
Evil was born.
What is the evil that the women are confronted with? The evil represented by the sinister phantom. The evil that causes murder, adultery, and forces women to sell their bodies. And what is the deal with those rabbits?
Is it about the bunny?
A quick word on terminology. Since there is no published screenplay, I will be using the names from the Inland Empire fandom wiki. Otherwise, I will use my own judgment. The room with the clock will be called the clock room. This guy I call Mustache Man. Yes, it's a little silly, but it's intuitive and accurate. Also, every now and then the video will become a still frame. This is for avoiding copyright strikes. Isn't YouTube great? Now we will journey to the Inland Empire together and learn the dark secret, learn why Lynch would tell this story this way, and ask one of the most important questions prompted by a movie about disjointed time. What will the future bring? The fact that we have to define how time and space and reality work should at least clue someone into just how obscurantist Inland Empire is. We have reality and fantasy merging, most notably when actress Nikki Grace actually becomes the character Sue Blue. We have characters from the past reappear in the present without aging. We have dead characters return to life. We have scenes in the US and in Poland, and characters can just walk between these locations. What's going on?
Nowhere in Inland Empire does anyone use the word reincarnation, but the concept hangs over the whole film, with characters appearing to have lived multiple lives.
Murray doesn't specifically offer reincarnation as a way to explain dead characters returning to life and characters from the past existing in the present without aging, but most people who subscribe to the reincarnation theory do. Does this work? Mustache Man and Polish Doris are murdered in Old Poland, and they exist in the present in different forms, played by the same actors. But doesn't reincarnation put the same soul in a different body? If we assume that in this movie, reincarnation puts you in an identical body, then we still don't have an explanatory framework. Lost Girl and the Phantom don't age, but we can't point to reincarnation as a mechanism for this because they don't die. Look at this graphic match of prostitutes Lonnie and Laurie in present-day Hollywood and in Poland in roughly the 1940s. Are they ageless immortals like the Highlander? How about we imagine that these characters are symbolic? That Poland and the US represent not real places but abstract ideas. Now we don't have to twist ourselves into pretzels to explain what would be logical impossibilities in a traditional narrative. But why do reality and fantasy merge? Let's remember Kingsley's words.
The film is never finished. The two leads were murdered. It was said to be cursed.
Kingsley says that the leads were murdered, not that the lead actors were murdered or that the lead characters were murdered. This implies that the two entities are inseparable. Kingsley's words are carefully crafted to refer to fiction or the reality. The idea that Vir Sieben is a separate reality, a fictional world created within a reality, is directly contradicted by Kingsley's words and the events of the film. Murray agrees.
Are we meant to be seeing the film Vir Sieben itself, or the actual events surrounding it? I suggest it doesn't matter, as the two seem to be one and the same.
Now consider On High and Blue Tomorrows. This is apparently a work of fiction wherein the real actress Nikki Grace becomes the fictional character Sue Blue. Nikki is happy and prosperous, unaffected by the curse. Sue is tormented and poor. She is cursed. Can't we just say that this is the curse happening to Nikki? Can we say that the pretense of an actress playing a character is merely a framing device to put this black magic into a different context? We can, and I think we have to. Also, Nikki/Sue seem to have the same husband in Piotrek/Smithy and the same lover in Devon/Billy. The fantasy and reality are so closely intertwined that we should think of them as existing in two different states of mind rather than two different planes of existence. This might seem like a bold assumption on my part, perhaps too bold. Can we just claim the power to throw away much of the pretense of Inland Empire in order to simplify it? Well, we're not the ones taking action. It is Inland Empire that has fatally damaged its own pretenses. It communicates that events take place in the past through costumes and sets, and then abandons that pretense. It communicates different layers of reality, nested stories, and then fails to follow those rules. We are not obligated to follow rules that the movie itself disobeys. Besides, if we ignore the pretenses of different times, locations, and layers of fiction, we simplify the story a great deal. We are not seeing a woman go through a magical, impossible transformation. We are seeing a woman's real nature change to a different, equally real nature. We are not witnessing reincarnation. We can say that Mustache Man has suffered a metaphorical spiritual death, and the forces that keep the thing he represents extant are also extant. So, he's alive again. But how did Piotrek Kroll become Smithy? It's obvious how the actors Nikki Grace and Devin Burke became the characters Sue Blue and Billy Side, respectively, but Piotrek is not an actor, and regardless, it's stated in no uncertain terms that Piotrek isn't involved in the film.
Your husband. He's involved.
No.
It appears that, while Nikki and Devin need to be cast as these characters in order to enter the diegesis of Blue Tomorrows, Piotrek just sort of breaks in.
He's been fascinated by Smithy. Keeps going on and on about Smithy, asking, who is playing Smithy?
This is the only acknowledgement that something is suspicious about the casting of Smithy. Smithy is not cast. Piotrek simply becomes Smithy. How is this possible? Well, let's consider an even trickier question. How did Mustache Man become Piotrek Kroll? It's because Mustache Man, Piotrek Kroll, and Smithy share a thematic equivalence, and that's the only logic Lynch cares about. But that doesn't mean that we can reject the idea of nested realities. What about the old woman known only as Visitor Number 1?
It was all really the old gypsy woman's tale anyway, a tale of what Nikki might become by taking the cursed role.
This seems to make sense as we seem to be going into Baba Yaga's confabulation when we cut to tomorrow, and near the end we seem to be coming out of this confabulation. Does this mean that 90% of the movie was Visitor Number 1 telling Nikki the story? That seems like a big leap. It implies that this happened off screen.
And then, after shooting the Phantom, you walked into the rabbit room, and the rabbits disappeared. Henry, did you even call the police?
I really want to see where this is going, Mum.
God damn it, Henry.
However, the grammar of film tells us yes, the majority of the film is Visitor Number 1's story. Dissolving from the main story to Visitor Number 1's face is pretty unambiguous, and any lack of ambiguity in a Lynch film needs to be embraced like a life preserver. Let us also consider that when we switch from reality to Visitor 1's confabulation, the first thing that happens is that Nikki gets the role. Nikki and company react like little girls, an exaggerated, dare I say, dreamlike version of how serious adults act.
And start bouncing up and down. Yeah, okay. Pals around and kissing. Yeah.
Also, the movie ends with an incomprehensible and cornball ending where Lost Girl and Smithy are reunited, even though it wasn't clear that they were star-crossed lovers. And their son is alive. Bonus. Except what son? What? The way that Sue defeats the bad guys and saves the day is reminiscent of the penultimate scene from Twin Peaks: The Return, where evil is defeated, and it's pretty uncontroversial that this is all Cooper's dream of an implausible happy ending. This childishly happy ending makes more sense if it's the construction of an old and defeated woman who wishes things had gone differently. Okay, so we have one nested story, but note that it is properly bookended by going into Visitor Number 1's imagination near the beginning of the movie and coming out at the end. What about the possibility that the entire movie is an episode of Axon N?
Axon N, the longest running radio play in history. Tonight, continuing in the Baltic region, a gray winter day in an old hotel.
We do indeed cut to the depressing hotel after this cue. So okay, that's part of Axon N. However, when we cut to color film, there was a lens flare like a camera pointed into a film projector. I think that this is where Axon N ends and Inland Empire begins. As further evidence, there is no bookending. We don't hear the announcer at the end of the movie. Well, that was tonight's episode of Axon N. And, wow, it kind of went off the rails tonight, huh? Honestly, I dropped out as soon as the rabbits came in. And why was it 3 hours long? Sorry. Another transition to a nested story happens when Sue performs a typically Lynchian ritual with a watch, cigarette, and piece of silk to see the events of Veer Sieben. Well, now things are getting interesting. Veer Sieben is supposed to be a work of fiction, but Blue Tomorrows is also a work of fiction featuring the same story as Veer Sieben. What does it mean for a fictional character to see the events of another fictional story? This relationship doesn't change at all if we make the events of Veer Sieben simply events that happened in the past for the characters of Blue Tomorrows. That's right, we just wipe away the pretense that these are nested stories within stories. So, Sue burns a hole in the silk, initiates the ritual, and we see the events of Veer Sieben. If we saw only the events of Veer Sieben and then pulled out of the silk, this would be easy to interpret. No such luck. We go into the silk and see the events of Veer Sieben, cross-cut with Sue's conversation with Mr. K, which we know happens in the future, and we see the most depressing barbecue in history, also cut up into pieces. Plus we see the rabbits, we see Lost Girl, and we see this inexplicable scene where Sue comes into the storage room and seems surprised to see the cigarette. What? Why is she surprised to see the results of her own actions? Sue isn't seeing another reality, Sue is seeing different parts of the film she is in. She can see past events and future events. This is confirmed in a very important scene where it seems that Sue is looking at herself. In this scene, Sue, in the storage room, looks up to see another Sue looking down at her. The second Sue is in the living room, and she looks to where the storage room is in relationship to her present position. Is the second Sue down there right now? I would say no. Sue is seeing a different scene from the film. Specifically, she is seeing a later scene in the movie. So, to summarize, the middle 90% of the film is Visitor Number 1's confabulation. Does this grant us the ability to sequester all of the weirdness into not real and all of the normal stuff into reality?
To unravel a structure inside, it's best to begin with this scene, one of the only parts of the film that I can consider to be real, at least real in the context of the story.
But no, the old woman arrives after we see the Axon N scene, Lost Girl, the rabbits, the Phantom appearing, and all of these things factor into her story. We have to assume that this weirdness is real, even if we can assume that we go into a dream at some point. We cannot chop up the film into real and fake. This isn't Inception, which is why the deleted scenes are titled More Things That Happened. All the events happened. I had made the case that, when Nikki becomes Sue, this is the curse happening to Nikki. This plot device has been used before, most notably in the episode of the original Twilight Zone, A World of Difference.
Cut!
Here, a businessman sees a camera crew in his office, which is actually a soundstage, and they insist that he is an actor, and the life he knows is a screenplay. It's a great cold open for a Twilight Zone, but is that all it is? Most people interpret this episode as a commentary on identity and delusion. Is it a cheap gimmick, or is it a means to comment on important topics? Maybe you don't think that the Twilight Zone is that deep, but let's assume that Lynch is. Let's assume that the curse is meant to speak to something real. A big clue into the nature of the Nikki-Sue dichotomy comes when the transformation reverses itself. Sue is murdered, and just like in that Twilight Zone episode, the director yells,
Cut it. And print it.
Nikki gets up, experiencing resurrection of a sort. Except this isn't Nikki, it's still Sue. The thing represented by Nikki has become the thing represented by Sue, and the transformation cannot be reversed.
It's not about Nikki.
This is the curse of Inland Empire. Optimistic Nikki can become the beleaguered Sue, but she cannot forget her experiences. She cannot return to being Nikki. The makeup crew attempts to remove her makeup. This is part of the process of Sue returning to reality and becoming Nikki, but Sue won't let it happen. Nikki is happy and successful and therefore immune to the curse. It's clear that Nikki is a famous Hollywood actress, perhaps inspired by Laura Dern herself. However, it's very strange just how little we know about Nikki, except for the fact that she's a movie star. We have no backstory for her. We don't know why she's married to random Polish emigre Piotrek Król. It's just boom, here's a movie star. The only thing we know about her past is this line from Kingsley Stewart.
Nikki, you have everything you need to soar back to the top and stay perched there. If we all play our role, do our best, well, this could be the one. This is a star maker if ever I saw one.
This implies that Nikki was a star, and Blue Tomorrows is a swing at a comeback. Why did her star fade? Well, there's lots of reasons that a star ceases to be in the spotlight. Sometimes they quit acting, or the opposite happens and the public loses interest in them. But there is another reason why an actress could fade from the scene. Film critic and Foth, friend of the Hammer, Sarah Stewart recalls this phenomenon.
There's a question I find myself asking when watching movies from previous decades. Whatever happened to that actress? She was so good and then just not around anymore. It comes up with depressing frequency. The tally of names is lengthy, and it's annotated with highly publicized rumors about this or that performer being, as it is so often and tellingly put, difficult.
The answer is that some actresses were blacklisted because they refused to give in to sexual predation. Stewart continues.
Recently, one of those actresses I always wondered about came forward. Julia Ormond is suing Harvey Weinstein for sexual battery, also naming the Creative Rights Agency, the Walt Disney Company, and Miramax for their alleged negligence.
That's right, Julia Ormond, who plays Doris Side in Inland Empire. If we think of Doris as a victim of the curse, then her casting is a bit of metacasting. Harvey Weinstein is the name most closely associated with sexual predation by powerful men in show business, and his crimes were well known before they were public in 2017. Since Nikki Grace is desperate for a comeback, Nikki Grace represents actresses who lost their career because they refused to succumb to sexual predation. Along with Ormond, another actress whose career was destroyed by Harvey Weinstein was Ashley Judd, and in Twin Peaks: The Return, she seems to be playing a bizarro world version of herself. Her relationship with her powerful boss, who represents a powerful studio head, is kept professional out of conspicuous moral righteousness.
Beverly, I can't do this. I don't know why it is.
You're a good man, Ben.
The predation of actresses is something I will call the casting couch in this essay. Yes, the euphemism obscures the abominable evil of coercive sex. However, the term is short and advertiser-friendly. But let's all remember that I am not talking about something cutesy and fun when I use the term. Having laid down this groundwork, I can state my thesis for this essay. The curse of Inland Empire is the casting couch, and therefore, Inland Empire is a movie about the casting couch. Lynch declares his intentions immediately. Let's look at the first scene from the film, when the unfaced prostitute and the unfaced John go to an old hotel on a gray winter day in the Baltic region.
Nie rozpoznaję tego korytarza. Gdzie my jesteśmy? To jest ten pokój? Nie rozpoznaję go.
This is not the normal way to get into the hotel, the movie studio. This is the other way, the way that is dark because no one talks about it. Let's remember that it is never definitively established that this is a prostitute.
Rozbierz się.
Dobrze.
Wiesz, czym zajmują się dziwki?
Tak. Pieprzą się.
This woman is explicitly like a prostitute. If you watch this scene and imagine that it's an actress being coerced into the casting couch, it makes perfect sense. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Note that she is literally on a couch. Yes, I know the casting couch isn't literal, the coercive sex could happen anywhere, but casting couch is the popular term, and that's how Lynch creates metaphors. The woman could be an actress literally having sex for advancement, or this could be metaphorical prostitution, as we call someone a prostitute if they abandon their integrity. Well, I don't. Sex work is work, but I'm here to explain Lynch's metaphors, not to judge them. The point is that this character represents the casting couch victims, actresses who want to get by on talent and keep their integrity, but this happened instead. So, the very first scene shows us a victim of the casting couch. Later, when we are in modern-day Hollywood and viewing the creation of a movie, the language used by the characters describes the casting couch so perfectly that I don't think you can interpret it any other way. When Kingsley talks about how the producers kept the curse a secret, he could easily be talking about how producers kept the casting couch a secret.
Now, Freddie is gathering information. Information is indispensable. We all have people who gather. Agents, friends, producers. And sometimes they share, sometimes not. Politics, ego, fear.
So, powerful people in Hollywood kept the curse a secret because of politics, ego, or fear? Either he's talking about the casting couch or Inland Empire is about something so abstract as to be indecipherable.
Freddie's found out that our producers know the history of this film and they have taken it on themselves not to pass on that information to us, purposefully.
Again, producers keeping the curse a secret. When Devon realizes that Nikki is succumbing to the curse, he confronts the unctuous producer.
And we just don't know the actual real reasons why this film wasn't finished. Now, you know some stories, but stories are stories.
Prior to the Me Too movement, this is what happened when women came forward with the truth. They were accused of making up stories. Hey, you wouldn't want to throw away your career over a story, would you? And when an actress was told to keep silent, they would surely be told that it's for their own good.
But stories are stories, and they shouldn't be taken as truth, or given credence, and jeopardize Nikki's performance.
Yeah, sure, it's Nikki that he's worried about. If the idea that Lynch is dealing with abuse by Harvey Weinstein and his ilk seems far-fetched, remember that his previous film, Mulholland Drive, was definitely about exactly that.
What truth about the Hollywood dream would Camilla represent? Camilla may have slept her way to the top. And once there, she brought Diane along with her. How does she make it to the party? Here comes Camilla to show her another way. A shortcut. A secret path that leads to success in Hollywood. Diane is being introduced to the casting couch.
And before Twin Perfect's excellent essay, Billy J. Stratton from Salon hit upon the same idea, that Mulholland Drive protagonist Diane Selwyn / Betty Elms represents the victim of the casting couch.
As with so many others who go to Hollywood, Elms is unprepared for an industry so consumed with exploitation and corruption. Her fate mimics that of the women who ended up falling into the trap set by Harvey Weinstein.
Now the thesis of Inland Empire is starting to come into focus, and we have enough information to decode one of the most prominent metaphors.
I'm a whore.
In his essay on Mulholland Drive, Rossiter of Twin Perfect makes the case that prostitution represents succumbing to the casting couch.
This is where Lynch draws the comparison between the casting couch and prostitution. When Mr. Roke calls around to find Camilla, a prostitute for the film industry, the call eventually makes it to a phone next to the red lampshade. Prostitutes work in red light districts, and the red lampshade, casting its red light, equates Diane to Hollywood's newest call girl.
This is why prostitution is so prevalent in Inland Empire. Prostitution represents succumbing to the casting couch, and we have many conspicuous red lights again, most notably the eerie lamp in the Smithy House bedroom. During one of Sue Blue's confessions to Mr. K, she confesses to being, well, sort of a prostitute.
I was screwing a couple guys for drinks, no big deal.
This is how a lot of real women transition into sex work, first exchanging sex for non-monetary compensation. So Sue is not a prostitute. Sue Blue represents actresses who are considering the casting couch, at least at first. We can see the journey of the casting couch actress through Sue's life. This is obscured by the fact that the events are out of chronological order, with the events before she succumbed to the casting couch mixed with events after she succumbed to the casting couch. Thanks for nothing, Lynch. And who appears to guide her? Experienced prostitutes, the so-called Valley Girls.
Who the hell are you?
I'll tell you who they are. Tammy, Kari, Lonnie, Sandy, Chelsea, Lori, Terry, Dory, and Sally. Sue is drawn to the storage room adjacent to the bedroom because it has a red light. The red light is distressing to her because she is considering abandoning her integrity for her career, working in the figurative red light district. Sue sees Billy in the red light. This means that her love for Billy makes her a prostitute. Does that mean that Billy represents the powerful man who coerces her for sex? No, and I need to emphasize this or this essay will be hopelessly confusing. No, neither Billy nor Devon represents the sexual predator in this convoluted metaphor. You see, actresses definitely do not love their predators, assuming we don't have a Stockholm situation happening. They love the success that they could achieve with the casting couch. This is Sue's love for Billy. Billy represents the hypothetical success prompted by the casting couch. This means that, if Sue has the affair with Billy, then the casting couch has claimed another victim. If that sounds crazy, remember that this is the same dynamic as the sexual encounter between Betty and Camilla in Mulholland Drive.
Betty makes love with Camilla, which symbolizes Diane on the casting couch.
I'm in love with you.
Camilla is an idea that Diane thinks she's in love with, the idea that the casting couch can take her to the top.
I'm in love with you.
Betty loves the success that could hypothetically come from abandoning her integrity and succumbing to the casting couch. Sue's love for Billy follows the same pattern, and the superimposition of Billy's face over the red light cements this. Again, when Lynch gives you a straightforward piece of information like this, you need to hang on to it like a life preserver. However, we cannot just say red light equals prostitute, because the red light disappears and is replaced by blue light when the Valley Girls appear. Remember, Sue's last name is Blue, and the movie title is On High in Blue Tomorrows. What does blue mean? If the red light representing the casting couch switched to a blue light, then what does the blue light mean?
The end of Diane's dream is a blue-haired woman saying silencio. Blue is the color of secrecy. The silence about the couch is the real Hollywood conspiracy. The blue box symbolizes the prison of secrecy that the Hollywood studio system has created. Betty disappears into the darkness inside the blue box prison of secrecy. Diane is now living in the blue prison of silence about the casting couch, trapped inside the blue walls of secrecy.
So if red represents the casting couch, then blue represents the secrecy that must be maintained to protect the casting couch.
All I see from this is blue tomorrows.
If Sue has the affair, she will have to keep it a secret. This is the blue tomorrow. Blue tomorrow means a future of secrecy. Tomorrow is referenced multiple times.
If it was tomorrow, you would be sitting over there.
It's a story that happened yesterday, but I know it's tomorrow.
Logically, tomorrow happens after midnight, so I assume that tomorrow and after midnight are synonymous.
After midnight, tomorrow, you owed on an unpaid bill.
Natychmiast, już po północy.
What time is it? It's after midnight. After midnight.
Tomorrow/after midnight is when you have to pay the price for succumbing to the casting couch. Sue is initially hesitant to have the affair because she understands the far-reaching consequences. Lynch gives us a primary color to identify this evil: blue.
I show you light now. It burns bright forever. No more blue tomorrows.
Light reveals the truth. In the end, Sue's enemies are banished by a spotlight. If blue represents secrecy, then the spotlight destroys secrecy. The rabbits in their blue room are vanquished by the spotlight. The Phantom is vanquished by a spotlight. Getting shot 4 times in the face was negligible. I had said that Sue represents the casting couch actress who must maintain secrecy, but something happens during her journey. Remember, her last name is Blue, Sue Blue. In the final act, Sue represents secrecy itself. Sue has a blue robe put on her by the studio that would expect secrecy. She is in a theater filled with red chairs, and she covers the red chair with a blue robe. Blue fabric is the cover-up for the crime represented by red fabric. This is not a minor detail I have blown out of proportion. Lynch meant to do this.
Laura has to have the blue robe. She wears that into the theater. You will then take that robe off in a certain shot, lay it on a red chair, which will look beautiful.
The Valley Girls are often considered to be a Greek chorus, or figments of Sue's imagination. Not really there. However, they are there. The Valley Girls are not merely generic sexy young women in a movie. The Valley Girls represent generic young sexy women in a movie. This is why this scene is on the Hollywood Strip, a purely representational portrayal of Hollywood. These are prostitutes on the streets and in the films. This is why the Valley Girls talk about their love for men in terms of the male gaze.
There was a man I once knew.
I so like to spread my legs wide and ran.
I'd let him do anything.
Tits. Tits and ass.
These are gonna bring him in like Flynn.
The Valley Girls provide entertainment of all kinds, being smaller characters in the background, having sex with men, or breaking out into a musical number that is unconnected from the narrative. Anything that a presumably male audience would like, they'll do it. But that's enough with the broad strokes. Let's take a look at a specific scene and see if my thesis makes sense. I had stated that Nikki represents the movie star who lost her career because she refused the casting couch. Then why did she get the comeback role in Blue Tomorrows? She didn't. Oh sure, right now a lot of women who went public about their abuse are having comebacks, but in 2006, they were like Julia Ormond, unhireable. Does this mean that getting the role is a fantasy? It certainly seems like it. Visitor number 1 seems to be talking to the real Nikki Grace. Sure, the scene is weird, but that's because Visitor number 1 is weird. If you assume that this is reality, and Visitor number 1 is a weirdo, you'll notice that Nikki is giving realistic responses to these Lynchian ramblings.
Evil was born and followed the boy.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Brutal fucking murder.
I don't like this kind of talk.
the things you've been saying. I think you should go now.
Then it appears that we are going into the visitor's imagination when we cut to a different scene of Nikki on a different day, talking to different people on a literal couch. Visitor number one's confabulation is the hypothetical world where blacklisted actresses can still get work. It's almost a child's idea of what being a successful actress looks like.
Champagne and caviar is on its way.
But of course the dream becomes a nightmare as Nikki literally transforms into her character. Nikki Grace becomes Sue Blue because she succumbs to the casting couch. Let us look at the dual meaning of playing a role.
So, you have a new role to play, I hear?
Up for a role. But I'm afraid far from getting it.
It is an interesting role.
If we all play our role, this could be the one.
Playing a role means acting in a work of fiction, but it also refers to the sum total of all the things one does in reality in respect to some function. The literal role of Sue Blue is the metaphorical role of being a casting couch actress. This is why fantasy and reality are often indistinguishable. There is a circular logic at play. Nikki becomes the role by succumbing to the casting couch, and succumbing to the casting couch is the role. The same thing happens to Lost Girl. I had mentioned that it is impossible to disentangle the character in Wir Sieben from the actress playing the character. Well, that's not completely true. This deleted scene showing the Lost Girl meeting the Phantom for the first time appears to be Lost Girl, the actress, winning the role in the film, unaware that, like Nikki Grace becoming Sue Blue, this actress will become the character. Let's look at the ending when we seem to leave Visitor One's dream to return to reality. We see Nikki Grace look at the couch again. This Nikki Grace is dressed entirely in blue on a literal couch. Nikki has succumbed to the threat of retaliation and remained silent. Nikki Grace has permanently transformed into Sue Blue. Secrecy has won. So who is Visitor number one then? This is the Hollywood establishment's idea of an untouchable. A woman who cannot be hired as an actress because she tells stories and doesn't maintain secrecy.
Which house are you living in?
Just down the way. Tucked back in the small woods. It's difficult to see it from the road.
Visitor number one is invisible. This is, collectively, the actresses who aren't even part of Hollywood anymore. But then Visitor number one gives Nikki a complete accounting of the events that will happen to her, or rather to Sue Blue, when she gets the part. She predicts that Nikki's husband will be part of the movie, even though that's not supposed to happen. She predicts that there is a murder in the story, even though there isn't supposed to be. She predicts the marketplace scene.
A little girl went out to play, lost in the marketplace, through the alley behind the marketplace. This is the way to the palace. But it isn't something you remember.
Of course, it's not something that Nikki remembers. It hasn't happened yet. But it has happened to Visitor number one. Visitor number one is an older version of Nikki. I don't mean that she is Nikki from the future, like a sci-fi story, but rather, she's on the same track of tragedy that Nikki is on, but farther along. This is why she can predict the events of the film. She has lived them. If you can understand this scene, you can probably understand any scene in Inland Empire. Before we cut to the literal back of the marketplace, we see Nikki in bed with Billy. The scene is turned blue because Nikki is now becoming Sue, and she will therefore be sworn to secrecy.
It's me, Devin. It's me, Nikki. Look at me, you fucker!
Nikki is in denial that she has become Sue. She is also in denial about the fact that she is with Billy and not Devin. Since she's talking to Billy as if he's Devin, Billy is flummoxed. This scene must logically happen after the marketplace scene, but tomorrow is the name we give to the time when an actress succumbs to the casting couch. So we get this line.
It's a story that happened yesterday, but I know it's tomorrow.
In other words, yesterday is simply the day before today, but tomorrow is when the curse happens, or happened, without regard for any rational timeline. The marketplace is the place where one sells themselves as an actor. Nikki is behind it, and she finds the back door to career success, the Axon N door. If you hadn't figured it out yet, Axon N is the casting couch. Since the casting couch is an informal thing, a thing that happens behind closed doors and is never formally acknowledged, the expression is handwritten on the wall in chalk. Later, we see the official and formal door to Axon N. It leads directly to the Smithy house. This lets us know that the Smithy house is where you go when you succumb to the casting couch. This is why a group of overly sexualized women are just there. When Sue, the character, enters the secret door to the movie studio, she sees the real version of herself, the actress Nikki Grace. This means one of two things. Sue still has a chance to remain the legitimate actress Nikki Grace and keep her integrity, or since Sue is a separate entity from Nikki, it means that it's too late. Sue is Sue and she cannot return to being Nikki. The latter interpretation is supported by the fact that Nikki disappears. Blink and you'll miss it. Nikki is sitting with Kingsley and Freddie just like she did the first time we saw the scene, but then she's just gone. The first time we saw the scene, Nikki didn't move, so continuity be damned, Nikki is gone. Only Sue remains. Sue runs from Devin. However, she is shouting, "Billy!" Does this mean that she thinks that Devin is Billy? No, Sue is in love with Billy. If she thought it was Billy, she would run to him. She understands that it's Devin, and who is Devin to Sue? No one really. While Billy represents the hypothetical success of the casting couch, as far as I can tell, Devin doesn't represent anything. When the possibility of having an affair with Nikki is broached, he's just incredulous.
So Devin, this one's off limits, right? Around Nikki, keep it in your pants.
What the fuck are you guys talking about?
My wife is not a free agent. What do you mean?
It's like Devin refuses to be in a David Lynch film. Note that his character from Mulholland Drive is similar.
Do you know somebody called the Cowboy?
The Cowboy? Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Howdy.
Howdy to you.
Devin isn't just incredulous. Devin represents incredulity. He refuses to accept that an affair could ever happen because he refuses to believe in the casting couch.
Unless the stories are true.
Devin, there's absolutely no proof that anything bad happened around this film.
Devin accepts this flimsy statement without pressing further. But back to this scene. Sue assumes that she can find sanctuary in the Smithy house, and she is right. Just like the real Nikki has turned into the fictional Sue, the Smithy house has become a real house with a real front lawn. It is now the sun and not movie lights that shines in through the window. Devin is still Devin, so it's just a set to him. Sue goes to the bedroom and sleeps with Smithy. She is imprisoned because she succumbed to the casting couch, represented by her sleeping with Billy. But this is before she slept with Billy, right? Well, it happened yesterday and tomorrow, of course. This is reconciled in a very subtle jump cut. We see Sue leave the bedroom and then it jumps to a different time. Remember, this is the edit as it appears in the movie. I didn't do this. We are cutting from before she slept with Billy to after she slept with Billy. In the storage room, she sees the red light become the blue light and she talks to the Valley Girls. So, Sue was in the marketplace for acting jobs and she chose to go through the secret entrance in the back, follow the red light to the red light district, and become a casting couch actress, meaning she's imprisoned in the Smithy house. You'll notice that I assume that Sue and Smithy, husband and wife, have a relationship that is also symbolic. Let's talk about that.
Is it about marriage?
Perhaps in some ways.
Is Inland Empire a love story? There's not a lot of people in love. Lost Girl is never really in love with the Phantom, Mustache Man is never in love with Polish Doris, Nikki isn't really in love with Piotrek, and Sue and Smithy don't seem to have any real affection for each other. Sue and Billy fall in love, but that relationship falls apart very quickly. Smithy and Lost Girl are in love, but this is almost a non sequitur. Nikki and Piotrek are married, committed, so they must represent ideas that connect in a deep and important way. Let's remember that Piotrek doesn't appear until we transition to Visitor Number 1's dream, and we never see him after the dream ends, so he might be someone completely invented by Visitor Number 1. If Nikki represents the actress who rejects the casting couch and prospers, then Piotrek represents the integrity to avoid the casting couch. He's kind of a poorly conceived hero who defends his woman from evil. This is why he's such an intimidating character, as it would take great strength to fend off the powerful evil of Hollywood.
There are consequences to one's actions, and there would, for certain, be consequences to wrong actions. Dark they would be, and inescapable.
What kind of young starlet has the strength and power to repel the kind of sexual predator that Piotrek mistakenly thinks that Devin is? None, really. Oh sure, most actresses make it without the casting couch, but if your fantasy is that any actress can make it while maintaining their integrity, then you must imagine a force like Piotrek Kroll. Devin's manager tries to scare off Devin.
If I don't kill you, her husband will, and he is the most powerful guy around. He knows everything. There's not a thing he doesn't know. Around Nikki, keep it in your pants.
What exactly is the power that Piotrek has? Some people assume that he's a crime lord or just a generic powerful guy, but what a strange way to describe power.
He knows everything. There's not a thing he doesn't know.
The logical inference is that Piotrek will know if Devon has an affair with Nikki. This is sort of true. When Billy and Nikki have their tryst in the impossibly blue bedroom, Piotrek knows. Does his international network of spies learn the secret? Nope. Piotrek just kind of wanders into the room and sees them and runs away. Piotrek doesn't do a damn thing. He knows what's going on, but doesn't do something dark in retaliation. What's going on? The only way one could know everything is if the overwhelming power of secrecy doesn't exist. Piotrek exists before Sue Blue, secrecy exists. This is Nikki, not Sue. But the room is ridiculously blue. By being with Billy, not Devon, Nikki is transforming into Sue Blue, and the blue light banishes Piotrek. Secrecy has vanquished him. He cannot know everything if things are secret, and so he cannot be Piotrek. This is how Piotrek transforms into Smithy. Nikki and Devon have to get cast as Sue and Billy in order to cross over to the other side, but Piotrek isn't an actor. This is why there is so much concern over who is playing Smithy.
Who is playing Smithy?
Yeah, who is playing Smithy? Let's recall that Smithy is the Blue Tomorrow's equivalent of Piotrek, so Piotrek is becoming Smithy as Nikki becomes Sue. When Piotrek becomes Smithy, he goes from being rich to being poor. He is no longer the avatar of integrity coupled with success. Smithy represents integrity that fails the actress who avoids the casting couch. This is why Piotrek is powerful and Smithy isn't. Piotrek is abusive towards potential romantic rivals, but Smithy is abusive to Sue. Piotrek exists in the today, Smithy exists in the blue tomorrow. Notice that Sue has no career, and her son is dead.
I guess after my son died, I went into a bad time.
Are the two things related? Doris is rich and has 2 sons. Since she is married to Billy, that means that she achieved prosperity through the casting couch. In other words, sons represent career success. Sue, with a dead son, is poor. Doris, with 2 live sons, is rich. But hold on, one of the sons is sick. So sick that they need a full-time doctor. It's never established that the son dies or that the other son is even sick, but the sickness seems to coincide with a reversal of Doris's fortunes. The next time we see Doris, she's in her junky clothes wandering the street. The dead son represents the failure of a career based on the casting couch. Yes, it's possible that the casting couch can bring you short-term success, but you'll be tossed in the trash as soon as you're no longer useful, for acting or for sex. You can go public with what happened and destroy your career, like Julia Ormond, or you do everything right and still get cast aside. Smithy and Lost Girl have a healthy son, which is weird since it's never been established that they had a son together. The son appears ex nihilo. Well, of course he did. This is the happy ending conceived by Visitor 1. This has nothing to do with the dark reality of Hollywood. This is too happy to be real, and it's no coincidence that the dream ends here. Also, it contradicts this.
I'm not who you think I am. Are you listening to me? I know it for the fact. I can't father children.
He cannot father children because you cannot have success and integrity in the nightmare of blue tomorrows. Sue transforms from a woman of integrity to the avatar of secrecy when Smithy leaves. This is also when she obtains the screwdriver and leaves the Smithy house for the Hollywood strip. Smithy says that he can't father children, period. But Polish Doris says that she cannot give Mustache Man children, not that she cannot have children under any circumstances.
Nie mogę ci dać dzieci. Wiem.
This implies that she could give someone else children, which she does when she is modern Doris' side, married to Billy. Doris cannot have success, sons, if she maintains her integrity, but if she comes to the casting couch, she can. Since Sue has a baby, a son who died young, we can assume it was Billy's, unless we want to account for another off-screen character being the father. So Sue and Billy can have a baby, but Sue and Smithy cannot.
This makes Sue's admission of her pregnancy an inadvertent confession to adultery.
Yes, it all makes sense on the literal level. Smithy leaves Sue because she was unfaithful. But for a holistic explanation of this bananas movie, we need to assume that everything is metaphor. Does this track backwards in time in Veer Sieben? Here, Mustache Man is with Polish Doris. Most people assume that they're married, but who knows?
Nie jestem tą, o której myślisz.
Smithy says, I'm not who you think I am, to communicate that integrity will not bring success. So that means that Polish Doris could be saying, I'm not who you think I am, to communicate the flip side of that, to say that she has integrity and it didn't bring her success. Polish Doris represents the urge to get by on talent. So Polish Doris tried to get by on talent and it didn't work. She remains in obscurity. In fact, she is obscure in versiben. Her back is always to the camera. Even the characters narrating this part of the story cannot identify her.
Who is she? Who is she?
Why does Lost Girl murder Polish Doris? We should not think of Polish Doris and Lost Girl as two different actresses or even two different women. They are two different aspects of a Hollywood starlet. If Lost Girl succumbs to the casting couch, then she is abandoning her dream of getting by on talent, represented by Polish Doris. Additionally, she is attempting to erase the possibility of herself remaining obscure. This is why Lost Girl kills Polish Doris. Lost Girl is killing her dreams. This is the terrible cost of choosing the casting couch. This is the debt you must pay.
I come about an unpaid bill that needs paying.
When visitor number 2 tells Sue that she must pay an unpaid bill, she understands that it means that she too must kill her dreams, and she dutifully retrieves the screwdriver. Let's pause for a minute and acknowledge that this symbolic reading of the events differs from the literal reading that is accepted by most Inland Empire fans.
She is one of the two leads, killed in what seems to have been self-defense when she tried to take revenge on Smithy's new love interest. She's been stabbed in the side with the screwdriver, something her later incarnation will remember.
Yes, Lost Girl kills Polish Doris because they're both in love with Mustache Man. This makes sense. In the future, these characters are back, somehow, and Doris kills Sue out of revenge. Easy, right? Except no. Doris's doppelganger was killed by Lost Girl. Why wouldn't she kill Lost Girl if she was really after revenge? Is Sue the reincarnation of Lost Girl? If so, then reincarnation arbitrarily puts you in a new body or the same old body, so that's not a satisfactory answer. Also, was Sue planning to kill Doris? That's also unlikely. If Sue went to the Hollywood Strip with the screwdriver to kill Doris, then when she sees Doris, she would say, aha, and take her shot at her. But no, Sue runs away. She is scared of Doris, thinking, correctly, that Doris plans to kill her. Doris just shows up to kill Sue when Sue is doing something. Besides, if Mustache Man was shot, why isn't he seeking revenge? You could argue that he is. We just have to make some uneasy assumptions. That Mustache Man was killed by the Phantom, and that Smithy takes the gun to kill the Phantom. But Smithy puts the gun in a dresser and forgets about it. If Inland Empire is a story of revenge, then it is a story of people who are really bad at revenge. When Doris arrives in modern Hollywood, she has been hypnotized by the Phantom to kill someone who represents the dream of making it through talent. In other words, she is now the new Lost Girl, and she must kill the new Polish Doris. And who represents Doris's dream of making it through talent?
I'm gonna kill someone.
Who are you gonna kill?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. We can assume that the someone is Sue, but why would the Phantom want Sue dead? And why would getting Doris to do it be the best way to do it? And why give Sue a weapon instead of giving it to Doris? If Sue isn't the target, then who is? What's going on? Doris's success is over now. She has been betrayed by the casting couch. Her success is gone. Her son's dead or dying, possibly. She doesn't want to kill Sue in order to get a shot at the success of the casting couch. That's over and done with. Doris wants to kill secrecy. Sue is still Sue Blue. Secrecy. There is no point in keeping the casting couch a secret if she gets no benefit from it. Remember, Julia Armand lost her career because she refused to keep the casting couch a secret. This is metafiction. Sue dies, meaning that secrecy dies. The red blood coming out of her mouth can be thought of as the secrets coming out. The random unhoused people start saying random things and most viewers chalk it up to Lynchian weirdness. But no, they are revealing secrets. They are speaking of all the evils in Hollywood because now they can. The blood coming out of Sue's mouth and the street person's monologue are parallel metaphors for secrets coming out. So all these husbands and wives and affairs and revenge murders mean something very different than they seem to be on the surface level once we examine them closer. But why do these different love quadrangles happen in different countries? If people represent different things, then should we assume that places do as well? If we assume that everything in Inland Empire is meant to be symbolic, then we should consider the possibility that Poland represents something. Yes, a lot of characters are literally Polish, but Polishness seems to mean something specific. Actresses who have not yet learned about the casting couch don't speak Polish.
You don't speak Polish?
No.
Piotrek has overestimated Nikki's understanding of the casting couch.
I think she understands more than she lets on.
But I don't speak it.
In this deleted but very revealing scene, the Phantom is surprised that Lost Girl doesn't speak Polish.
What?
Nie rozumiesz?
You're speaking Polish.
Nie?
I don't understand. I don't speak it.
The secrecy of the casting couch is very important in Inland Empire, but nothing is completely secret. In real life, those who know about the casting couch talk about it, but they are careful in how they talk about it, almost speaking in code, like they are speaking in a foreign language. Polish is the language of people who are in on the secret of the casting couch. All of the scenes in Poland take place entirely in Polish. Poland doesn't represent a real place, but a vague zone of safety. Poland is where you can talk about the secrets in the open. This is why the limitations of the real-life physical distance between the US and Poland don't exist. They are different states of being, not literal states. You can just walk from Poland to the US. If this sounds far-fetched, let us recall that in Mulholland Drive, when people are speaking secrets, they just randomly start speaking in Spanish.
No hay banda. There is no band.
¿Dónde estás?
Yo nunca fui a Casablanca con Luigi.
Silence is so important that no one can even say the word silence in English.
Silencio.
Silencio.
So Spanish is to Mulholland Drive as Polish is to Inland Empire. Now we can understand the prostitute and the John who both have their faces obscured in the first scene, Axon N. Even though the woman represents the actress who gives in to the casting couch, she is faceless because this isn't an actress who gave in, this is the first actress to give in, and therefore all actresses who gave in. Poland is where the casting couch began. Why is that? I have no idea. There is no reason to associate the country with the casting couch. I think that Lynch wanted a foreign country and a foreign language to be a recurring metaphor, but maybe it was an arbitrary decision to pick Poland. Lynch loves Poland and he loves shooting in Poland. Maybe that's the only explanation there is. The first time we see present-day Poland is when Sue transports there. This lets us know that Poland is not a place but a state of being. Lonnie and Lori are trying to warn Sue. Of all the Valley girls, only Lonnie and Lori are prostitutes in Old Poland and on the Hollywood Strip. They understand the casting couch better than anyone and are usually the ones offering Sue advice. This is why Sue is able to see herself in Poland. Lonnie even pulls back the curtains of the set piece that should show the Paramount studio interior or the front yard of the Smithy house, but it shows Poland instead. Sue has an understanding of the situation, so she can see Poland. In modern-day Poland, the entertainment choice is the circus, the real-life Cirque Zalewski. Piotrek is going to literally run away and join the circus.
I will take care for the animals. It was said that I have a way with animals.
The circus appears to be running well, with Smithy delighting the audience with a trained horse. If we assume that Piotrek is working for entertainment devoid of sexual predation, then animals represent sexual predators.
Zaprowadzono konia do studni.
He's talking about the ease with which powerful people in Hollywood can prey on young starlets. Without a Smithy/Piotrek to fight them off, they are like a thirsty horse at the well. Freddie Howard is old enough to have been part of old Hollywood. He even knew Clark Gable. He says this about his experiences.
I like dogs. I used to raise rabbits. I've always loved animals. Their nature, how they think.
Freddie must have been the guy who kept everything under control. Also, Freddie mentions rabbits as one of the animals that he used to raise. This implies that our mysterious rabbits are part of the evil. If you need someone who is good with animals to run a tight ship, then what happens if no one is good with animals?
My friend Nico, she has a pet monkey. This monkey shits everywhere, but she doesn't care. This monkey can scream, but there are those who are good with animals, who have a way with animals.
She is describing a movie set where the director, the producer, some powerful above-the-line person is shitting everywhere, openly harassing cast and crew and causing chaos. We finally see Nico in the very last scene under the credits. We don't see literal monkey, feces, but her presence here implies that there is a sinister subtext to this otherwise happy song and dance. The circus represents entertainment without the casting couch. And what kind of person keeps a sexual predator under control? No kind of person. Remember, we are still in Visitor Number 1's dream, where Nikki Grace can exist free of the casting couch, initially, and heroes like Piotrek can keep a tight lid on the situation. The functioning circus is ultimately destroyed by the Phantom. The last bastion of entertainment that was free of the casting couch falls. It all went wrong one night at a bar.
There was this guy they had working there. They all called him the Phantom. He got in a barroom fight one night. All the bar was arrested. A lot of them fucking circus clowns. So when they take them all down to the station, guess what? The Phantom's done gone and disappeared.
This is the monkey shitting everywhere. The Phantom started the trouble and everyone else got punished. In fact, you could argue that the Phantom wasn't arrested because the casting couch is invisible to the people in charge of figuratively policing bad behavior in Hollywood. Disney and Miramax said that Julia Ormond was the problem, not that Harvey Weinstein was the problem. They didn't see the metaphorical Phantom. So returning to Poland was an attempt to try and live a life free of the casting couch. The curse. But it failed. Of course, Sue's connection to Poland comes from a very specific person, and it's time to talk about her. Lost Girl is the first character whose face we see, and she seems to be a sort of secondary protagonist after Nikki/Sue. Lost Girl also has one very important attribute. Lost Girl is watching the film she is in, the real film Inland Empire. This is such a startling revelation that it's almost hard to believe that it happens 4 minutes into the movie. Lost Girl is in room 205 of the Polish hotel, and she is watching the movie on TV. She, or someone else controlling the TV, fast forwards past the first scene with the rabbits and the scene of Visitor 1 approaching the Grace Kroll mansion. These are the very next scenes in the movie.
With Carolina here, in a red dress, covering herself, watching television. We did playback of rabbits, we did playback of Visitor number 1, we did static.
Let's just think about how mind-blowing this is. Lost Girl is watching herself. She is not watching a video camera feed of herself. She is watching a scripted and completed film about her character. If you've seen Twin Perfect's video about Twin Peaks, you know how significant it is that a character could have this kind of diegetic awareness.
What is the magical light? How about the light on someone's face when they're watching TV? Laura is watching TV and nodding with the understanding of the cosmic joke that she is a literal TV character who wouldn't even exist had it not been for the show about her own murder.
A lot of people are still very, very angry about this interpretation of the ending to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I guess it's because we have to make a lot of assumptions to conclude that this is the correct interpretation. After all, Lynch never gives us a reverse angle to show that Laura's watching a television. Well, that's not the case with Inland Empire. There it is, the television showing the movie that Lost Girl is in. She is watching the movie she is in because she is remembering her past, stewing in regret. She has knowledge of the casting couch, but she can't do anything with that knowledge. Lost Girl's imprisonment represents the feeling of helplessness an actress feels after succumbing to the casting couch. Visitor number 1 can sit down and have coffee with Nikki, but Lost Girl does not possess the ability to communicate with Sue. Except, yes, she does.
Do you want to see? You have to be willing. Watch. You light a cigarette. You and turn right through the silk. You fold the silk over. You look.
Lost Girl appears over the image of the old phonograph record. This is the first image of the film if you don't count the titles. Sue is testing out her new diegetic awareness, and I guess if you see the movie you're in for the first time, it starts from the beginning. But this time, Lost Girl can poke her head through and speak directly to Sue. Sue can see the film she is in, the real film Inland Empire, but she can only see it linearly from start to finish, at least at first. Lost Girl is giving Sue instructions for viewing Ver Sieben using the bizarre silk and cigarette method. I can explain the watch thanks to this deleted scene. At a party, the Phantom reveals that he has a collection of watches for sale in his coat. This is a trope that has its own page on TV tropes. Usually the watches are fake Rolexes.
You want to buy a watch?
I heard about them. That they are magic. That they bring you good luck. I want to have some good luck. Things are not going so good, but...
The luck is the success you can have in Hollywood through the casting couch. She pays with cash from her shoe kept in her soul. Her soul. I don't know if we can assume that Lynch codes things by adding an extra letter, but the trope is that they are Rolex watches, and by succumbing to the casting couch, the actress gets a role. She has sold her soul for a role. Later, visitor number 2 is wearing a similar watch. The watch represents initial agreement to succumb to the casting couch.
That guy, he's been coming round, selling watches again.
Assuming that there isn't more than one watch seller, then this is Crimp. He attempted to sell Sue a watch, but Sue has not yet succumbed to the casting couch. She has a watch when she sees into the past, so presumably off-screen she bought a watch from Crimp. Remember, Lost Girl said to put on the watch, not to put on a watch. So what is the role earned by Lost Girl? The role she plays in Wir Sieben. She is awarded the role of playing the person she becomes by succumbing to the casting couch. Again, it's circular logic. The watch and the cigarette hole in the silk allows Sue to see the film in any order, like she can now fast forward and rewind. We now know that she is seeing the past because the hands on the watch start moving backwards. Lost Girl's ritual allows Sue to control the movie. This represents the act of organizing one's thoughts, coming to terms with one's past, what happens when one survivor helps another. Now Sue and we can see the events of Wir Sieben. Lost Girl sees the Phantom one more time in Old Poland. Lost Girl is different. She is now the equivalent of a prostitute, a streetwalker.
Przywykłem do widywania się z tobą w naszym domu, nie na ulicy, a nocy.
But why is the Phantom different to Lost Girl?
Myślisz, że mnie nie poznajesz, mojego sposobu bycia.
To prawda. Wydajesz się być kimś innym.
No, he doesn't. The Phantom is acting just like he always does. Why does Lost Girl say that? It's because the Phantom, the evil, the casting couch, is no longer unfamiliar to her. It's part of her life. That's why she almost walked right past its avatar. She's used to it. The next time we see Lost Girl, she is a prostitute. It would appear that Laurie is hypnotizing Lost Girl. Some people interpret this as the Phantom impersonating Laurie in order to get close to Lost Girl, and while that is an intriguing notion, it doesn't really work. This scene should logically take place long after Lost Girl is hypnotized. Laurie and Lonnie start laughing at Laurie's gesture. They are making fun of the act of hypnotizing someone. It's a gesture everyone recognizes, like everyone has encountered it. It's an inside joke, gallows humor. Does this mean that all the prostitutes were hypnotized by the Phantom at one point? I think that's the best way to interpret this. When Sue pulls out the screwdriver, the Valley Girls walk away. They know what the screwdriver means. Maybe they'll stick by Sue and make sure she isn't murdered. No? Okay then. The final stage of succumbing to the casting couch is regret. You can see all the mistakes you made, like a movie playing in your head.
I was watching everything go around me while I was standing in the middle, watching it like in a dark theater. Before they bring the lights up, I'm sitting there wondering, how can this be?
To symbolize this, Lost Girl is literally watching the movie that she's in. She is an early victim of the film's antagonist who deserves a closer look. You probably guessed by now that the Phantom represents the casting couch. Billy represents the success one might obtain. Women love him the way they love success. The Phantom represents evil writ large. In this scene, the Phantom is Sue's neighbor, Crimp. Crimp represents the casting couch and Sue represents secrecy, two ideas that neighbor each other, metaphorically. Sue gets the screwdriver from Crimp, but it's unclear if Crimp has any control over Sue. What is clear is that the Phantom has the red light bulb, which represents the casting couch. Maybe this is the subtle threat that the Phantom uses to control Sue. But what about the idea that the Phantom composes another person? When the Phantom is shot, his face turns into a distorted version of Sue's face. We have seen this face before, on this super creepy shot where Sue runs into the camera. Is this Sue? This shot happens right after Gordy says that the Phantom is escaping to the Inland Empire, so it kind of makes sense that this is the Phantom moving to a different diegesis. Also, Sue is watching this scene. The next shot is Sue being just as spooked as we are. Again, this is not my edit, this is how it appears in the film. This is not Sue. This is the Phantom disguised as Sue, and this is Sue seeing that scene. Later, when Sue is in Hollywood, this grimacing Sue is egging on the Valley Girls. Another Sue sees this Sue, so it makes sense that the first Sue is the Phantom in disguise. Fake Sue is making jokes about the process of becoming a prostitute by repeating the words of the prostitute from the first scene.
Gdzie jesteś?
Boję się. Where am I? I'm afraid.
This is the Phantom, sharing in gallows humor with the Valley Girls. But why is it that the Phantom can appear as Sue? Is it because the Phantom is an aspect of Sue, or vice versa? This kind of makes sense, but let's take a look at the first time we see the Phantom as Sue. We start on a close-up of an image of a clown, likely a clown featured at the Polish circus. Is this Lynch's way of associating the grimacing Sue with a clown? Well, on the Hollywood strip, it is the creepy Sue who was joking around with the Valley Girls. As prostitutes, they are now unserious women. This is part of the curse. The Phantom makes her the object of ridicule. This is telegraphed in the rabbit scenes, where Jack Rabbit, the one male rabbit, gets applause. But the two female rabbits get laughter.
What time is it? There have been no calls today. This isn't the way it was.
And they also laugh at Sue's voice.
Billy?
So when Sue shoots the Phantom and sees her own face, that's how she comes to understand that her reputation has been destroyed. The distorted face exaggerates the feminizing makeup, red lipstick and black eyeshadow, clown makeup. In Mulholland Drive, the judges from the dance competition, who represent judgment, are laughing. A lot of people misremember that the judges are going to kill Diane, like it's a horror movie. But no, they're mocking Diane. And this is more frightening than anything to a woman who wanted to be taken seriously as an actress. Sue wants to be taken seriously. Only an impersonator would embrace the idea that her tragedy is funny. The Phantom is killed or in some way defeated when Sue shoots him. Sue is using the gun that was given to Smithy by the three old Polish men. However, the Phantom isn't riddled with bullets, he isn't bleeding, he doesn't even seem hurt. In fact, after the first shot, he's kind of smiling in defiance. It's the spotlight that ultimately hurts him. The spotlight represents investigation, the end of secrecy. The Phantom has been defeated by exposure. It would hardly be consistent with Lynch's philosophy of nonviolence if evil is defeated by getting shot. However, the defeat of evil by truth, honesty, light, that makes sense. The Phantom's face is replaced with the distorted face of Sue. The Phantom can only exist if Sue keeps her story a secret, but she refuses, so his face is replaced by the image of Sue bleeding from the mouth. Of course, we cannot say for sure that it's blood, it could be any red liquid, but red represents the casting couch, so Sue has forced the casting couch to release the secrets. It is the spotlight, exposure that defeats secrecy and vanquishes the casting couch. Doris forced the secrets to be revealed by murdering Sue Blue and causing blood to come out of her mouth. But this victory wasn't real. It was merely a movie. Now Sue has achieved the victory in, we'll say, a more real version of the story by properly defeating violence with exposure instead of more violence. As the red liquid is released, we see Lonnie and Lori running down the hallway, free at last. If the red blood-like liquid is one symbol of the secrets, then these two women are another symbol of the secrets. Both are released. With the spotlight destroying the Phantom, they are free, and Lost Girl is free. Since Sue Blue represents the act of keeping the secrets, she disappears. The gun that was supposed to murder the Phantom, but proved worthless, was given to Smithy by the three old Polish men, the Rabbits. And now we can start to answer one of the biggest questions about Inland Empire. Let's review what we have determined so far. The Rabbits are living in a weird blue room that seems to act like the set for a sitcom or play. When Sue opens the door, the spotlight of revelation hits them and they're gone. Does this mean that the Rabbits are also associated with secrecy? Remember that Jack Rabbit is Mr. K, one of at least two of his human identities. Sue reveals what appear to be unrelated stories to him. Why?
So I was told you could help me.
Sue is looking for help. A way to get out of the curse of the casting couch. Of course, the most obvious way to do this is to betray the oath of secrecy. Just tell the press, the studio head, the cops, someone in authority. Mr. K represents some authority who can do something about the casting couch. This is another nod to Julia Ormond's story or to similar stories. Ormond went to her agency, CAA, as well as Disney and Miramax and spilled the beans, assuming that they would help her. But nope. Her own agent was working for the studio system, just like Mr. K is actually a rabbit man. Ormond went to the higher-ups, as did Sue.
That's one hell of a fucking climb getting up there.
Sue's stories seem to be a series of non-sequiturs, but she is definitely talking about sexual assault, getting into sex work, and stories that, while abstract, are definitely meant to be terrifying. Sue trusts Mr. K, but then Mr. K makes a mistake. He is trying to tell his colleagues, maybe one of the other rabbits, that it's red time, but accidentally uses the Polish word for red. Polish is the language of those who know all the secrets, but if Mr. K knows all the secrets, then why is he extracting them from Sue? Sue figures this out. She has been betrayed. So we know that the rabbits know all the secrets. Mr. K was pretending to listen to Sue, just like executives at Disney pretended to listen to Julia Ormond. Do they defend secrecy? Are they villains? The spotlight, the antithesis of secrecy, scares them off in the end. Early in the movie, when Jack Rabbit travels to the room where Yannick, sitting on a couch, talks to the Phantom, a spotlight fades on when he fades off and vice versa. This establishes that the rabbits cannot coexist with the spotlight. In their forms as the three old Polish men, they direct Smithy to shoot someone, most likely the Phantom. Wouldn't that make them the good guys? What about the possibility that the rabbits are giving the gun to Smithy for selfish reasons? Even though it's Sue who shoots the Phantom, she gets there at the same time as the Phantom. Did the Phantom just get there for the first time? Was there a race to get to the 47 door? Well, what evil plan would the Phantom be executing if he got to the rabbits? What about destroying everything? The Phantom is evil, so why not destroy show business itself? The rabbits are show business. Since they seem to just loom over every other aspect of the story, this would make sense. As Mr. K, Jack Rabbit reveals that the Phantom, Crimp, is coming and they're scared. They understand that exposure will wipe out all the bad guys, including themselves. And they're right.
Hi everyone, Jack Rabbit, here to offer some balance to the Hammer's slanderous words. First of all, the idea that we rabbits represent show business itself. Just because we live in an apartment that can only be accessed by going through a movie theater, by going through a movie set, doesn't mean we represent anything related to movies, much less show business in general. Rent is cheap when you live in a geometrically impossible residence. You know how much money Stuart Ullman saved by putting his office next to that window? Also, the idea that we're evil, or that we allowed the casting couch to exist. Calumny! Yeah, that Crimp guy probably does represent the casting couch or whatevs, but don't forget, we gave Smithy the gun to kill him. We want the casting couch gone as much as anyone. Now, a cynic might say it's self-preservation. We need to get rid of the casting couch before it hurts us as much as it's hurt so many women. Remember, we allied with Smithy. We made sure that we were associated with integrity. It's not our fault that Crimp's pervious to gunfire. Regardless, the light of exposure vanquished him, or whatever, so no harm, no foul. Oh yeah, the light of exposure. You might have noticed that when the spotlight hit us, we disappeared. Well, we like it in the dark. When I'm Mr. K, I like a dark office. When I'm Francisek, the old Polish man, I like a dark office. Don't you know that rabbits live in the dark? We're nocturnal. No, you're not. We're not? We're not nocturnal. Well, the point is that there was a damn bright light. Besides, that couch stuff is old news. Weinstein and his type are gone, and Me Too rules the land. I mean, can I be frank with... No, I can't be frank. Frank's from Donnie Darko. From now on, we only abuse our employees in ways that aren't illegal yet. So keep going to the movies, America. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 2 o'clock in Glendale with the aforementioned Frank and Harvey.
If the rabbits are evil, it kind of seems like good wins out. The spotlight makes them disappear, and Sue can now enter the rabbit room and discover that the audience that was cheering them on and laughing at them doesn't exist. The truth has been revealed and the good guys won. Or did they? If Lost Girl and Smithy/Piotrek are reunited with each other and with their son, if the Phantom is dead and Nikki or Sue is standing in the rabbit room, the final boss defeated, then it's a happy ending, right? Well, we have to cope with the fact that we return to the Grace Kroll mansion and we see visitor number 1, and this reaction shot implies that the majority of the movie was her confabulation. If so, then this final shot is a sad reversal. Nikki turns to see her doppelganger dressed entirely in blue and sitting on a literal couch. Either this is Sue Blue replacing Nikki, or Nikki herself is now the avatar of secrecy. She did keep the casting couch a secret, and as tragic as this is, it's true to the time period. This was before Me Too, and most people in Hollywood kept the secrets. But what about the closing credits? Surely the upbeat dance number indicates that this is a happy ending, right? I don't think so. Nikki wears the blue dress in this sequence, and now let's decode the other characters. We see Laura Herring, likely appearing as her Mulholland Drive character.
Camilla Rhodes is the casting couch. Camilla is another abstraction with a human form. The blonde kisses Camilla and then looks at Diane with her lips stained with Camilla's lipstick to symbolize her sexual exchange on the casting couch and the stain it left on her reputation.
So this kiss is a confirmation that Nikki Grace did in fact succumb to the casting couch. But if this seems far-fetched, remember that the Nastasia Kinski character is there as well. This must have been baffling to the original audiences because her entire scene was cut out of the theatrical release. But Kinski's character succumbed to the casting couch, and we know that because she had an identical experience to the prostitute from the first scene.
We got to the hotel, and I was kind of hanging back in the dark while he was getting his key.
Nie mam klucza. Nie masz. Dałaś go mnie. Ja go mam.
I didn't recognize any of it. I didn't know where I was. It was like I was dreaming.
Nie rozpoznaję tego korytarza. Gdzie my jesteśmy? Co się ze mną dzieje? To jest ten pokój? Nie rozpoznaję go.
This is a tragic ending. Nikki ended up another prostitute in a world of prostitutes, a woman who represents prostitution, and these other symbolic figures. First, we see the one-legged sister of the Phantom.
Sweet.
The opulent mansion, the results of succumbing to the casting couch, are hers to save her. And who is this character?
He had a sister with one leg. She had a sort of car stick for the other one. She killed 3 kids in the 1st grade.
Perhaps the children she murdered are the equivalent of Sue Blue's son dying, or Doris Side's sons possibly dying off-screen. The sister of the casting couch murders Success, and Success, the mansion, the palace, is hers to dangle in front of aspiring actresses. Nico and her monkey, who shits everywhere, is here. The monkey, an uncontrolled sexual predator, is free to do what he wants. The Valley Girls are dancing for our entertainment, just like they did in the movie. Monique Cash sings Nina Simone's Sinner Man, a famous song about a wrongdoer finally getting his just desserts after multiple unsuccessful attempts to hide from judgment from the Christian God. But if we interpret this as aspirational, not an accounting of history, then the Sinner Man is still running free. I'm quite convinced that this is meant to be a tragic ending. This is keeping with Lynch's work where cheeseball happy endings are illusory. And let's remember, sexual predators were still operating with impunity in 2006. Giving this movie a happy ending would simply not have been honest. I am not going to say that Lynch is clairvoyant, but the Me Too movement, the sudden exposure of bad actors in Hollywood, kind of looks like his fairy tale ending of a magic spotlight banishing evildoers. I'm also not going to say that the problem has gone away. Harvey Weinstein was the best known, not the only predator. Additionally, the equivalent of the casting couch exists in every business, but the media focused on bad actors in a glamorous industry. For the victim, there is abuse, trauma, gaslighting, things that are dysregulating. You start to experience time and space and reality itself in a dysfunctional way, and Inland Empire may have replicated that feeling. The film takes a strictly internal process and makes it into a physical journey through impossible locations with literal monsters coming out of every corner. The solution is to create a new environment where secrecy doesn't exist. It will take all of us, men, women, everyone, to let the future Harvey Weinsteins know that
there are consequences to one's actions, and there would, for certain, be consequences to wrong actions, dark